Picture this. It's 1662 somewhere in England. Samuel Pepys, a well-to-do gentleman, has just spent the night at an inn. He wakes up, stretches, and writes in his famous diary, "Up finding our beds good but lousy, which made us merry." Read that again. Lousy. As in crawling with lice. And his reaction? Merry. Amused. He found it funny. A few days later, traveling with his friend Dr. Clerk Pepys, writes again about their bug-infested accommodations. He jokes that the fleas must prefer the doctor because of his nobler bloodline. Blue blood attracts better parasites, apparently. No disgust, no panic, no frantic scrubbing or demanding a refund. Just a chuckle and a note in the diary. Now imagine pulling back the heavy curtains on a medieval bed. The fabric is thick, designed to trap warmth in a freezing stone room. Inside, the air is humid from breath and body heat. The mattress beneath you rustles as you shift. Not just from the straw filling, but from something else. Movement. Tiny legs. Hundreds of them. Maybe thousands. In the morning light you'd see them. Red bite marks scattered across exposed skin like a constellation. Some fresh and swollen. Others fading into purple bruises. Your sleeping companions, 2 or 3 others sharing the same bed for warmth, would have matching marks. Children curled against parents. Servants pressed against other servants. Everyone bitten. Everyone itching. And everyone just accepted it. This is the story of how humanity slept for centuries alongside armies of insects. How medieval beds weren't just furniture, they were ecosystems, complete with predators, prey, and a food chain that ended with you. A medieval bed was an insect's paradise. Not by accident, but by design. Every choice made for human survival created the ideal conditions for something else to thrive. Start with the bed itself. The 4-poster bed with heavy drapes that we imagine as luxurious wasn't about aesthetics. It was about not freezing to death. In a medieval castle, the temperature inside could match the temperature outside. Stone walls held the cold like a grave. So you created a tent inside the room. Thick curtains on all sides, wool or fur lining if you could afford it. At night you pulled them shut, sealing yourself in. The result? A microclimate. Inside those curtains, body heat had nowhere to go. The temperature could be 20 degrees warmer than the room outside. For humans huddled under blankets, this meant survival. For bedbugs and lice, this meant the tropics. Paradise. The perfect breeding temperature of 70 to 80 degrees Fahrenheit maintained all night, every night. Then there was... He was on to something. Featherbeds held heat better than straw. They were dense, impossible to inspect, impossible to clean. And they were never replaced. A nobleman's featherbed could be decades old, passed down through generations, accumulating not just years but populations, a heritage of parasites. And then there was the final ingredient in this perfect storm. You never slept alone. 2 people per bed was minimum, 3 was common, 4 wasn't unusual, children with siblings, servants with other servants. Even guests might share your bed. Warmth was more important than personal space. Medieval people didn't sleep spread out. They curled up tight, knees tucked in, arms wrapped around chest, bodies pressed together. For bedbugs, this was an all-you-can-eat buffet that never closed. Let's meet the roommates, the creatures that called your bed home. First, the bedbug. Cymex lectularius if you want to be scientific about it. Flat, oval, reddish-brown when fed, nearly invisible when hungry, about the size of an apple seed. But it wasn't their appearance that made them notorious. It was their smell. Every medieval and early modern text about bedbugs mentions the stench. Oliver Goldsmith, writing in the 1770s, described it vividly. When they begin to crawl, he wrote, the whole bed is infected with the smell. But if they are accidentally killed, then one pregnant female could produce thousands of offspring within a few months. and bedbugs could survive for over a year without feeding. Waiting. Patient. Then there were the lice. 3 varieties each with their preferred territory. Head lice in your hair. Body lice in your clothes and bedding. Pubic lice in places we don't need to discuss in detail. Unlike bedbugs, lice had a biblical pedigree. They were the 3rd plague of Egypt summoned by Moses and Aaron. All the dust of the land became lice throughout all the land of Egypt. Medieval people saw lice as instruments of divine judgment. Thomas Muffet, that same naturalist who wrote about bedbugs, called lice the scourge of God. Ancient tyrants were said to have been eaten alive by them. Herod Agrippa, Antiochus, Epiphanes. The Roman Emperor Maximinus II, whose genitals supposedly erupted with lice before he died screaming. But lice had one peculiarity that medieval people found darkly fascinating. They were extremely particular about temperature, specifically body temperature. When a body cooled, lice evacuated immediately. The most famous example is Thomas Becket. When the Archbishop of Canterbury was murdered in his cathedral in 1170, witnesses watched something extraordinary as his body lay cooling on the stone floor. Lice began to emerge. Not a few. Thousands. They poured out of the many layers of clothing he wore over his hair shirt. One chronicler described them as boiling over like water in a simmering cauldron. The crowd watching alternated between weeping at his martyrdom and laughing at the spectacle of insects abandoning ship. This became proof of Becket's holiness. The man was so devoted he wore a lice-infested hair shirt beneath his rich robes. Suffering in secret. Medieval saints did this. Franciscan monks did this. They embraced lice as a form of mortification of the flesh, a way to imitate Christ's suffering. Your pain had meaning when it brought you closer to God. For everyone else, lice were just part of daily life. Village evening entertainment often included mutual delousing. Women would sit in the sun, picking through each other's hair and their children's hair, chatting, building community bonds one louse at a time. The 14th century French historian Emmanuel Leroy-Ladurie describes a scene from a village where Benete and Alizé's wives were being deloused in the sun by their daughters. Marjorie Kempe, an Englishwoman on pilgrimage to Jerusalem in the 15th century, describes her horror at seeing fellow pilgrims take off their clothes and, sitting around naked, pick themselves for vermin. She was too modest to undress, she claimed, and therefore through mixing with them was dreadfully bitten and stung both day and night. Even staying clothed didn't save you. And then the fleas. The acrobats of the parasite world. Less documented than bedbugs or lice, but no less present. Fleas could jump from bed to bed, person to person, spreading faster than you could track them. Pepys joked that fleas preferred his traveling companion's blood because the man came from older, nobler stock. Blue blood tasted better. This was a man making lice and flea jokes in his diary. This was normal. The great acceptance. So here's the question. Why didn't medieval people lose their minds? We're talking about sleeping in beds actively crawling with insects that bite you all night. Waking up covered in welts. Smelling the stench of crushed bedbugs in your sheets. Feeling lice moving through your hair during dinner. And yet for centuries this was just fine. The answer is simple and profound. Everyone had them. Everyone. Peasants and nobles. Merchants and clergy. Kings and beggars. When something is universal, it stops being disgusting. You can't be horrified by something that's as common as breathing. It would be like complaining about gravity. Pointless. Samuel Pepys, of that same diarist who found lousy beds merry in 1662, came from a middle-class family trying to climb the social ladder. His father was a tailor. When Pepys and his wife argued in 1663, she called him a prickloose, which was slang for a tailor. The insult referenced the fact that tailors worked with lice-ridden clothes. Pepys was mortified. Not because lice were unusual, but because his wife reminded him of his common origins. But even Pepys, sensitive about status, accepted that lice happened. At least at first. Medieval theology helped. A lot. If lice were everywhere, they must be part of God's plan. Thomas Muffet explained that lice entered the world through original sin. Before Adam and Eve ate the forbidden fruit, humans were free of vermin. But when they fell, God humbled him with divers diseases and divers sorts of worms, with lice, handworms, belly worms, others called termites, small nits, and acares. Lice were punishment. Reminder of human corruption. Everyone was a sinner, therefore everyone had lice. The logic was airtight. Some took it further. Saints didn't just tolerate lice, they welcomed them. Hair shirts deliberately cultivated lice populations. The constant itching, the bites, the discomfort, all of it was suffering that brought you closer to Christ's agony on the cross. Pain had purpose. In 1746, over a century after Pepys of the Gentleman's Magazine published a serious theological debate about whether Adam and Eve had lice before the fall. Educated men writing letters back and forth arguing about the original parasite load of humanity's first parents. One correspondent concluded, "We can hardly suppose that it was quartered upon Adam or his lady, the neatest, nicest pair, if we believe John Milton, that ever joined hands." This was the level of intellectual discourse about lice. Not how to eliminate them, but whether they predated human sin, and practically speaking, why fight what you couldn't win? There were no effective treatments, no real solutions, just acceptance. Medieval concepts of cleanliness were also very different from ours. Clean meant washing your hands and face, making sure your visible linen, the collar and cuffs showing under your outer clothes, looked fresh. But clean undergarments, clean bedding, optional. Many medical texts from the period emphasized washing hands, face, and feet for health, but beds, not mentioned. Water on your hair was considered dangerous by many. It could let in harmful vapors, unbalance your humors, make you sick. So people avoided it. And lice loved that. But bedbugs. Bedbugs never got a pass. Even in the Middle Ages, even when lice were accepted, bedbugs were loathed. They had no redeeming qualities. They weren't divine instruments. They weren't tests of faith. They were just disgusting. Samuel Johnson's dictionary, published in 1768, defines bug as a stinking insect bred in old household stuff. That's it. No complexity. No nuance. Just stinking. Of course, people tried to fight back. Medieval and early modern housekeeping manuals are full of remedies for killing parasites. The recipes range from dangerous to deranged. The basic theory was that strong smells could drive out bugs. Fumigation was popular. One manual recommended mixing rue storax and turpentine, then sprinkling the mixture on chafing dishes of burning charcoal. Shut the room or chamber as close as possible, it instructed, and go out to avoid the scent yourself. And shut the door after you, and the strong scent will kill them. It might also kill you. Many people died in medieval times not from freezing, but from carbon monoxide poisoning in poorly ventilated rooms. And houses regularly burned down when fumigation attempts got out of control. In 1760, a maid in England set her master's house on fire while trying to burn bugs out of her bed. Dr. Boyle Godfrey tried various chemical combinations: turpentine and arsenic, rue and wormwood. His most successful attempt involved sulfur mixed with oil of vitriol, heated on a charcoal stove in a sealed bedroom. The result was a prodigiously strong funk that was such as will kill all creatures in the universe, including presumably anyone who opened the door too soon. Other remedies were just bizarre. Noel Chomel's Dictionnaire économique, published multiple times in the 18th century, recommended the smoke of cow dung, rotting cucumber, and ox gall mixed with vinegar. But the most disturbing remedy deserves its own moment. Here is how you make a bedbug ointment according to Chomel. First, kill a cat. By suffocation only. Drawing blood ruins the recipe. Remove the skin and guts. Roast the cat on a spit. Do not lard it. Do not baste it. This is important. Just roast it plain. As it cooks, collect everything that drips out. The fat, the juices, everything. Mix these drippings with egg yolks and oil of spike in equal parts. Pound everything together in a mortar until it becomes an ointment. Then rub this cat-based concoction onto the parts of your furniture where bedbugs gather. One physician, after reviewing all these remedies, concluded they were nothing but frauds. William Cutie, a cabinet maker who also offered pest control advice, had a different solution for those whose bedbug problems couldn't be solved. If you can spare your bedsteads for some weeks or months, he wrote, commit them naked to the yard or outhouse, which will be of singular use. Excessive heat or excessive cold being the absolute cure of all vermin. And if that didn't work, buy a new house. For travelers, there was no escape. You could inspect beds before sleeping, but bedbugs hide in cracks smaller than a sheet of paper. You could bring your own linens, but bugs would crawl into your luggage. You could sleep fully clothed, but bugs bit through fabric. The bugs always won. They could survive months without feeding, waiting patiently for your return. They hid in places you'd never think to look, and they reproduced faster than any killing method could keep up. Here is the beautiful irony. The wealthier you were, the worse your bug problem. Castle architecture made it worse. Noble bedchambers were located in upper floors of towers, farther from the earth's natural warmth, more exposed to wind, and they had large windows. Windows were expensive, a way to show off wealth, but they had no glass. At best, wooden shutters. More often just oiled cloth, so cold air poured in. Meanwhile, servants slept near the kitchen hearths, in basements where stone retained daytime warmth. Some even curled up beside livestock in castle stables because body heat, whether from a cow or a cousin, was better than none. Warmth came from location, not luxury. And then there were those feather beds. The more expensive your mattress, the better the habitat for bedbugs. Dense feathers created countless hiding spots. The material held heat beautifully. And cleaning, impossible. You couldn't take apart a feather bed to inspect the interior. You certainly couldn't wash it. Once bugs moved in, they stayed. Elaborately carved wooden bed frames, another status symbol, just added more cracks and crevices for bugs to hide in during the day. The rising middle class of the 18th century had it worst of all. They desperately wanted to signal their status. A fine bed was essential, but bedrooms were also used for entertaining, receiving guests, conducting business. Imagine the social disaster of a visitor smelling bedbugs in your chamber. The humiliation. So the middle class blamed servants. Servants were accused of bringing bugs into respectable homes. After all, servants came from lower-class families, crowded housing, questionable hygiene. They must be the source. In 1760, a maid accidentally killed a porter by giving him bug poison instead of brandy. The bottle of liquid bought to destroy bugs looked too much like the liquor bottle. Some went further, accusing the lower classes of biological warfare. In 1733, a porter named Robert Spire was indicted at Westminster for bringing a number of live bugs in a bottle to the Bagnio house of Mr. Bates in Pall Mall, and throwing them secretly under his beds with intent to destroy his furniture. The jury returned ignoramus, meaning not proven, but the accusation shows the paranoia, the fear that bugs could be weaponized, that the poor might deliberately infest the rich. Class warfare fought with insects. Something shifted in the 18th century. The acceptance crumbled. Tolerance turned to horror. Samuel Pepys shows us this transformation in real time. In 1662, remember, he found lousy beds merry. By 1669, everything had changed. He writes in his diary about discovering lice on his own body. "I have itched mightily these 6 or 7 days," he confesses. And when all comes to all, she, meaning his wife, finds that I am lousy, having found in my head and body about 20 lice, little and great, which I wonder at being more than I have had, I believe, these 20 years. His reaction: shame, horror. He was not only sick but ashamed of myself to see myself so changed in countenance. His wife cut his hair close to his head. He changed all his clothes immediately. And then he went to bed with much content, knowing he was clean. From merry to mortified in 7 years. That's the story of an entire civilization in one man's diary. What changed? The rise of the middle class created new standards. Cleanliness became next to godliness, literally. Bathing, previously considered dangerous, became fashionable. Clean underwear became a status marker. Wigs became popular partly because they let men avoid dealing with their own lice-ridden hair. Just shave your head, wear the wig, and have it professionally cleaned. The miasma theory of disease helped too. People believed bad smells caused illness. If bedbugs smelled terrible, they must be causing disease. If you could smell them in someone's home, that person was not just infested, but contaminated, corrupted. A whole new profession emerged. Exterminators. Bug killers. They advertised their services with testimonials from satisfied nobles. They attacked competitors as quacks and frauds. They claimed scientific methods and secret formulas. The industry was built on shame. The problem? Nothing actually worked. Not until DDT in the 20th century. But that didn't stop the exterminators from marketing. Humanity survived centuries sleeping with parasites. Not because we defeated them. Not because we enjoyed it. But because we adapted our expectations. Medieval people looked at a lousy bed and shrugged. Modern people look at a bedbug report and panic. We've lost that acceptance. We've lost that resignation. And maybe that's progress. Maybe it's better to be horrified by parasites to fight them with every tool available, to expect clean beds and private sleeping spaces. But there's something almost admirable about medieval tolerance. Not the bugs themselves, but the ability to live with discomfort. To wake up bitten and just move on with your day. Bedbugs are making a comeback now. Global travel resistance to pesticides, the ban on DDT. Hotels are infested. Apartment buildings. Even luxury homes. And modern people are genuinely traumatized. Studies show bedbug infestations cause anxiety, depression, even PTSD. People have been hospitalized for psychiatric care after discovering bedbugs. They've set their apartments on fire. They've bankrupted themselves on extermination attempts. Samuel Pepys would have found this baffling. So pull back those bed curtains one last time. See the straw mattress rustling with movement. See the bite marks forming on exposed skin. See the bodies huddled together, 2 or 3 or 4, to a bed seeking warmth in a freezing stone room. See the lice crawling through hair during evening prayers. See the bedbugs emerging from cracks when the candles go out. And see the people sleeping through it all. Because they had no choice. Because everyone was bitten. Because complaining changed nothing. They curled up tight, knees tucked in, arms wrapped around their chests. They pulled the curtains shut. They slept. And in the morning somehow they found it merry. Medieval beds were crawling with life. But so were medieval people. And they survived. They always survived. Not through comfort. Not through victory over parasites. But through sheer stubborn human endurance. That's the real story. Not the bugs. But the people who refused to let bugs stop them from sleeping.